Okay, greetings, friends. Welcome to season 2 of Free Range Thinking. Join us in our cozy recording caves and dive into some interesting topics and rabbit holes around the topic of neurodiversity with us. I'm Alex Carl.
And I'm Sharon Lee. And every week we serve up a delicious buffet of neurodivergent snacks, topics, discussions, questions, and explorations around the subject of living as a neurodivergent human. We enjoy talking about and celebrating how people like us can not only thrive in today's world, but prosper. And this is important because the world desperately needs neurodivergent humans to bring real transformation and evolution to mankind.
We are the keys through the shitstorm of a one-size-fits-all world, and that is no joke.
That is no joke, my friend.
Yeah.
So, what do we have on the table to talk about today?
Ooh, you mentioned something about learning and laughing and
Mm-hmm.
creativity that I
Mm-hmm.
found really interesting and had an immediate connection to, and maybe we can connect it later to some of our downhill parkings.
Yeah, I had it was actually in a, came across a workshop, and one of the things that popped up was the question of kind of like how important is laughing and learning. And for me, I was like, well, that's it's everything. It's everything, and it sort of has to do for me the tie-in with curiosity, of course, and for little kids. And if we're laughing while we're learning, it goes in really deep, and then it's anchored. So I think a lot about how to, if I'm doing a workshop or if I'm doing a talk or a coaching and something is really important, I think about how to put the humor into it in order to anchor it, to have it be anchored as deep as possible because of the joy factor in it. And this is how little kids learn. This is how humans, learn, and I would say in the best way.
Mm.
Yeah, it's my kind of my opinion, but then there's a bunch of studies which you can, if you want to know the studies, Google it. I'm not gonna Google it. I didn't Google it this week, so probably not. It's probably not gonna get Googled. and but it's an interesting area of study. Yeah, the higher curiosity rate we can have while learning something, the more anchored and the more enjoyable it is, and therefore we stick with it. And instead of just learning it to memorize it, there's no joy in that. There's no
Yeah,
joy.
I mean, we just had the discussion some weeks ago at the dinner table if um, memorizing something or learning something by heart, if it's really useful or not. I mean, learning or memorizing a poem or a song may be useful if you have to perform it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But memorizing it just for memorizing's sake, for me, for example, it is really a pain in the ass to memorize something. And um, I have really a really strong fear of forgetting something. Or for
Mm-hmm.
example, when I'm doing a speech or a keynote or so, I always have um, a lot of moderators notes in my presentation, and I always have a presentation because I need the presentation to keep it structured. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
it might be. I don't know. I never tried it to free wing a speech or a keynote because I'm really insecure if it would be followable for the audience, because I would start speaking, and then I think the ADHD would kick in, and I would go from this to there, and then this down this rabbit hole, and then I come up there again, and then I fly a little bit through the air, and then I go down another rabbit hole. And it might be fun for some neurodiverse people who can follow it in the audience, but if I know, or if I'm pretty sure the audience are a lot of neurotypical people, then I'm not sure if they could follow it, or if it would be any pleasure trying to follow that zigzagging. So I always
get to the point. But it's in the journey, and but and I don't necessarily think that I'm going to say neurotypicals are uncomfortable with wandering around. It's funny, there are definitely some neurodivergents that ask me to get to the point. So that's not just a neurotypical thing, but I can feel myself wandering off, just like what you described. Yeah, so it is a question of like, hey, who's loving this, and who is it frustrating? But yeah, having a structure. Yeah.
As Matthew said in our podcast, a measure for neurodiversity is how much, or a diagnostic measure for how strong your neurodiversity is how much you annoy neurotypicals.
Yes. I love that. No. Okay, how Germany, everybody wants you to be an expert in something, or a specialist. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I could probably hold a degree in that. Where's my diploma? Where's my badge? Where are my trophies?
And I mean, when you are able to induce a lot of humor into a learning process, I would say that is one ingredient of a really extraordinary teacher. When a teacher can really make it enjoyable to learn, I would say the first step to get the attention of people. Yeah. Anchor some points.
Yeah, that my best teachers always, there's laughter in the classroom.
Yeah, and you were looking forward to like get a new lesson, or always thought, okay, what might they have prepared for today? What could be the fun thing today?
Now there's this. It's funny. The opposite can be true as well, because I remember this one teacher I had, and it was in biology, and he was so serious, and I was just amused. Now, this wasn't him being funny. It was that he was so serious. And I found it particularly funny in people's reactions to him. And I was probably, 15, I guess, 15, 16. And that class was fun because of the contrast in it, and that I found it particularly funny. So I think that's also interesting is are we laughing outside, or are we laughing inside? And is one more particularly not valuable, but pertinent, critical maybe to learning and anchoring?
I remember a teacher as well, and it was a biology teacher as well, who was really...
What is it with biology, huh?
Maybe it's maybe it's the nature science, natural science. How is it called? Maybe that is one part, that those people that study those natural sciences, that maybe a lot of them are really serious, because he was quite serious, but on the other hand, he was also really interesting character, and one who he took his job really serious. I think he understood himself more as a biologist than a teacher, because like every 3 or 4 months he went to Siberia, or he went to Galapagos Islands. Wow. So he really was a little bit of an explorer, but also a teacher. So that made him really interesting. But he wasn't funny.
That's pretty cool.
I can't remember him being that funny.
One of the in that aspect of having an odd but very interesting teachers. I had a teacher and she was taught geography. And normally I'd be like, yeah, this is interesting to me. Not at all, because it was geography generally is just memorization.
Mm,
And this woman, and I don't know how old she was up there, and she was small, and she was just super interesting because she had traveled all over the world.
mm-hmm.
And then at one point, of course, we were outside of Washington, D.C., so I'm like going, in my mind, I'm like going, okay, she's the wife of a spy. Maybe she's the spy, And then I just had this whole, like scenario in my head, but so smart. But we could get her off of, we were supposed to have a quiz or something,
Uh-huh.
and you just have to ask her a couple questions, and she'd be off and running and telling stories. And she had us transfixed
Yeah.
with the stories,
Yeah.
and she was such a great storyteller. And then all of a sudden the bell would ring, like, oh, oops, no more time for the quiz. And we did it to her all the time. But she was so great.
Yeah.
She was just so great.
Yeah.
Because it was like the amount of storytelling and the fascination, and she made the countries come alive, the countries and the people. And yeah, I look forward to her class, every time. Every time.
The first thing I think about, and we never did that, but when I think about geography, if I would be a geography teacher, then I would try to entertain the students with those kind of stories, and I would let them draw fucking maps, because geography is also about, the first thing that comes to my mind is drawing maps.
Yeah.
And how people started to draw maps. And the first thing I would tell them is the Higgs und Dracones thing. Do you know that, Higgs und Dracones?
I'm not sure.
Higgs und Dracones is the Latin expression for here are dragons, or here may be dragons.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Back when the people started drawing maps, and when everything they didn't explore, like Fog of War in a strategy game, everything they didn't explore yet, they wrote Higgs und Dracones into the map.
Oh, excellent.
Because they didn't know what is there, and this tiny piece is already such a great story. I would like to know much more about.
Can you write that in the chat? I need to see it. I need to see it and put it in my file for the artwork that I'm doing for the NFTs.
Oh, it's with an...
Yeah, I just got what you were talking about. I was just like, oh, and I had this...
An exclamation mark.
You wrote it again. He wrote it again, just to let everybody know. He wrote it again, but put an exclamation point on it.
Because I remember it's mostly on this map. Yeah, but
I love it.
What I was immediately what I was remembering immediately when you talked about the laughing and learning is the conversation I had with our martial arts coach some weeks or months ago, when he told me that he discovered, he's a martial arts teacher for more than 40 years, and he started out with judo and then with TaeKwonDo, which are really traditional martial arts from Asia, from Japan and Korea. Back then they were taught really, really traditional, and they tried to copy this hard style of learning from the Asian teachers. And we come to this topic because I said, do you realize how Western and European your teaching style is here? He said, what do you mean? Because he thought about something completely different. And I said, yeah, you are teaching, you are very far away from this traditional Asian style. So we all call the trainers here trainers or coaches, and by their first name. nobody says something like sensei or guru or however in other martial arts, or master, or in other schools the people call the teachers or the trainers. And I had a conversation earlier that to another guy who did karate for several years, and he totally liked that. And I said, "Oh no, I couldn't stand." And that's when I realized that our school is really special in that. And my trainer said, "Ah, yeah, okay, now I understand what you mean." And he said some of the trainers are still in this traditional mindset, and he said I try to get them a little bit out of this, and to show them that with laughter and with fun, I mean, you are allowed to have fun while learning martial arts.
Right.
And he says that especially, for example, the self-defense courses for women, who have really a reason to go to a self-defense course. He said, I try to make it as light-hearted and as fun as possible, so that they like to come here and that they like to learn. He switched a bit. He said he switched when he opened up 25 years ago, when he opened up a normal fitness studio or a fitness gym. He said because then he had to learn how to motivate people and how to induce fun into the training, because there's a big drift. He said there's a big drift difference between people who want to learn martial arts and people who come to a gym, because people who want to learn martial arts
Right.
are intrinsically motivated most of the time because they have a reason to learn martial arts, and people who
True.
go to a gym and just to want to get off some weight or get fitter, they have to be motivated by the coach from the outside. And that's when he learned to motivate people and to induce fun into the training, and that he got over into the martial arts training later on. And he said
Interesting.
it works wonders.
And I've got another connection in the martial arts um, that I was studying, the particular kind, the Hapkido, and our the
Oh,
sensei was, very,
we
very,
have a Hapkido coach as well in our school.
yeah, yeah, and supposedly the person who um, created that style of fighting were women in the mountains, so that they
Hmm.
use the body's resistance against each other from against themselves or against itself, the body's
Hmm.
weak points against itself, and because it was for survival, it was done to incapacitate, and or kill.
Hmm.
Um, of course, it was it evolved then to be like no, 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 just run away if possible, but it was created by people who were small and had to defend themselves, and so it's very, very lethal and effective, and yeah, so I found that to be very interesting.
Mm.
But the thing I was going to say, it was connected, was the sensei, this guy, and he was like ex-military, very very manly man, um, and it perplexed them, like during, we would do the regular workouts and training and whatever, but then when we would do sparring, it's I would giggle, I
Hmm.
would laugh, and he would just it would piss him off, and he'd be like, "Why are you laughing? Stop laughing!" I'm like, I don't know why. It just, I found it funny,
Hmm.
especially if somebody, if got through my block and was able to smack me in the face. It just made me laugh. I don't know why. To this day, I can't say why, but it was just the sparring thing I found funny, and yeah, and it's not like, if I was in a violent situation, I wouldn't be laughing, but there's something for me that's connected with the learning stuff, because I remember, like it was yesterday, all these practices and sparring practices, and it's completely anchored.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that thought
The
popped in my head.
same thing happens to me all the time. As hard as harder as I'm getting hit, the more I have to laugh, because it's I don't know. It's just an impulse.
That's so funny that you have that too.
I can't describe it. I mean, one of the younger trainers, he used that 2 or 3 times in the eskrima training, where we work with sticks. When new people are there,
Hmm.
he showed how you start wielding those 2 sticks,
Right.
and you are training on each other, and then you say, okay, and then you go slowly over, you go across the chest of your partner, or across the shoulder if your partner is a woman, and then you get a little bit faster, and then you can hit a little bit harder. And he goes like, see, Alex, you go as hard as he starts grinning, and maybe a little bit more.
Using
but
it as
then
a
but then it's enough.
measuring. Right. Well, I do know it pisses people off. I do know it pisses people off to laugh when they're, trying to be serious. So I'm careful with it.
Yeah, then it's even funnier.
But I know, right? Right? And right. And that makes me, and and this is the part where I was like going, oh, later, during the pandemic when I was finding out more of the fuller cocktail and the ingredients in my neurodivergence, and the certain things where I'm, right on the edge of like Tourette's type of thing. And I wondered, is that a thing? Is that part of it? I'm not sure. I have no idea. But it's that thing of like, don't think about the blue elephant in the room. And then, it's that kind of thing. So if I see that somebody's, pissed off that I would be laughing where it's inappropriate, it's so hard for me not to laugh.
Yeah,
Because then I see the ridiculousness in it and the absurdity, and then it's like, why do I think it's funny? The whole thing is funny to me on so many different levels that it's but I learn again, this is the learning thing. It's completely connected with the learning thing in my head, or in my hardwiring. Yeah.
I mean, a good state to be learning is a flow
Mhm.
state, and a flow state
Mhm.
always have to be enjoyable. Then it's easier, at least to get in this flow state. So,
And
I,
like yoga, I would be in this yoga classes, and again, so serious, and
yeah,
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's my inner 9-year-old boy. I don't know what it is, but something tickles me, and then I'm screwed. I can't, have a really, really hard time,
I think I,
reining it
I,
in.
I have one approach to explain it. Uh, maybe I know for me is the
Hmm.
aphantasia, because
Hmm.
yoga classes, especially when something is explained in a really visual way, it's just boring for me. And then I have
Hmm.
to entertain myself. And maybe for you, the
Hmm. There's a
hyperphantasia kicks
quote.
in, and when a yoga teacher is explaining something in a really broad image, or colorful image, then maybe the hyperphantasia kicks in for you, and that's why it's getting really funny.
Oh, good point. Good point. Oh, because yeah, it's I definitely go into that. Well, what if that would happen? What if that would happen? And then this would happen, and then that would, and then my brain is off and running. The comedic side of it is just, you know.
In those 3 or 4 yoga classes I attended, it was it was, I have to laugh already now. For me, it was always the thought, okay, what if anybody has to fart now? Because that would be really funny in my head.
It's for me. It's the seriousness of the,
Yeah,
I want to say, the culture around the yoga thing of, we're so calm, we're so zen, you know and I keep wanting, it is just all I can do to suppress the thing of
if
like,
you
fuck
say,
this noise, I can't,
I just wanted to say, if you say 2 sentences more in this yoga teacher voice, then I'm already bursting in laughter, because ah. It makes me crazy because it's so
Oh, I
interesting.
couldn't do a yoga class with you. You'd have to be like in the other room because if we made eye contact during a yoga class, it would be, and there were certain people that I couldn't, that they were in the, because I took the yoga teacher training. I don't know, so yeah, I went through the whole training for the certificate. Didn't end up taking the test because hello, test anxiety and, in
But they
German.
taught you how to
Although
do
they,
the
you could have
yoga
had it
teacher
in
voice.
English, but what's that?
But
Well, that's
they
the
taught
thing.
you to do
I'm
the
not,
voice.
that's the other thing. It's like we had to do a couple of the, you have to do the um, lead a class and a thing like that. But it's like, yeah, the whole thing is wrong for me. I don't, it's just, I kept feeling like, okay, this is not sound how it's supposed to sound, and I would giggle, and it just, it doesn't seem very. Now, I've heard of them doing, people doing like laughing yoga, but that seems to me that it would get kind of manic. I'm not sure. I never went to one because I was just like, yeah, I don't know about that. Um, that you're forced to laugh, and that's what the yoga. I was like, wait. If you're forced to do it, yeah, nah. What's the fun
Mhm.
in that? And so I never went to one. I probably should have. Yeah, it's the whole cultural thing. And I mean, the yoga studio. It was in is it Ettlingen? Yeah, in Germany, in Baden-Württemberg,
Mhm.
outside of Karlsruhe, and they're great. It's a yoga house. If anybody's listening to this, it's a great place. And Bettina is the owner and the one who runs everything, and she's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I can't think of a better person who I would want to go to a yoga class, in her yoga class. And she wasn't totally serious. She was really cool,
Mhm.
and so, she was completely open with me laughing, and so that's why it worked. That's why I decided to do the training. It's like, okay, cool, I'm comfortable with her. And but it was interesting, still as cool as she was and as open as she was, and just full on, and not like your average so serious yoga teacher. It was funny how like a lot of people still embodied the seriousness
Mhm.
in it, which is, I mean, what happens in like work situations and social situations. And it's like adults aren't supposed to laugh anymore. I don't
Yeah, and I
know.
think especially in those activities come from totally different cultures. Uh, a lot of the teachers seem to, especially if they are quite new to teaching, um, it seems to me like they try to be more original than the originals, and so
Yes.
they
Yes.
overdo it,
Yes.
and they overdo it
Yes.
because they want to seem really serious. Because if you see teachers like the Bettina that are doing it really long for a long time,
Hmm.
those often are found a comfortable way get
Yeah.
away from those all those traditions and those Eastern traditions that are not really that don't are really instantly compatible to European
Mm-hmm.
cultures
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
often.
Yeah.
Uh,
And she blends them. You
yeah,
made a good point because
yeah,
she
it's a
blends a
blending.
lot of stuff. And she's like, make it what you want.
Yeah,
Make it what you want. And I was just like, which is really comfortable for me. I wouldn't have ever done it if somebody said, this is the only way to do it. I'm like,
mm. Bye.
that inner resistance, the inner rebel would be like, now I know that's wrong.
Watch me.
Yeah. But the laughing and learning thing is so important. It's so vital to retain that childlike open state of curiosity, and it's definitely a yes and mindset, or um, a both and,
Mm.
because little kids are completely open and little kids find everything funny.
Yeah.
And so it's like, gosh, how do we help each other either retain it or get back to it?
What do you think
And
is
then the next question, I was going to say, and is there a question, do neurodivergent have more access to that?
I wanted to ask if you have an idea where or when the point is reached when people lose that. I mean, is there a point, or is there a threshold we can
Mm.
figure out when most of the people lose this open-mindedness and yeah, this open mind of the child? Or is this a really slow process
Good question. I think it
without
depends
a
on the person.
yeah?
Yeah, it depends on the person, depends on the family. It's obviously cultural things, what I was describing in the last episode that we did, and that sometimes it's death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Mm,
It's a slow, insidious closing of a door
mm,
and or many doors, multiple doors. But sometimes if somebody comes from a family culture, um, you know, here's a good example. My mother's cousin Deanna. My mother would love to go. Every once in a while, it was rare, but she would go spend a week or so with Deanna and the family. And Deanna's father and my grandmother were brother and sister. Very, very, very serious, very mm, acidic is a good word. And so my mother grew up in a very, it was very heavy household um, ambiance. And so Deanna's father was like that, but her mother was open and magical. And my mother would tell me stories of being in the house, and the three of them, Deanna, my mother, and her mother, I forget what her mother's name was, but they would be, carrying on and laughing, and the father would be like, "Stop that laughing! Why are you laughing? There shouldn't be laughing." I'm like, wow. And that really, that story really stands out to me. It's like the joy squashers,
yeah.
and there are joy squashers in families. And it's like, what does it take? And you imagine what would Deanna have been like if both parents were joy squashers.
Yeah.
But at least she had her mother, so she had enough, she could, have a resistance and she could withstand that.
Mm,
And Deanna was joyful, till the day she died. She was amazing. And, my mother as well, but my mother clung on to that every once in a while because she knew that was an example that life could be different. And so my mother was very joyful in life.
mm.
And, so we grew up in a joyful atmosphere, which helped us withstand, public schooling and, and society in general. Um, yeah, because it does. Yeah, I could withstand the death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I was able to retain, the joy and have access to it. Yeah, but it's like, not everybody has, is in a family like that. I think if you grow up in a family that as a kid you have models of joy, you're able to better, not always, but better,
Mm.
maybe you have a chance, put it that way, you have a chance of retaining some of it, at least some of it. Whereas the world and people who are very, very sensitive, they also have a very difficult time sometimes retaining it because the world, even if they have it at home, the world can be so brutal and joy squashing that it's hard to hang on to it. So it also depends on personality type. It depends on a lot of things, a lot of things. And sometimes there's a tragic event, and that can, if there's trauma involved. So there's not a one size fits all
Yeah, that's
thing.
what
The fact that any of us make it through it all is a freaking miracle.
yeah, I
Yeah.
just thought if those two, the parents of Diana, if they were like this all the time, because then I think, okay, how did they even got together?
Good
A, re
question.
a really
Well, back then,
joyful,
divorce was not a thing. Okay.
a very joyful person, and but maybe there was some kind of traumatic event in the relationship as well, that maybe he got this joy squasher and maybe he wasn't always kind
No,
of
he was always like that. The family, I could say that because it's like the family, my grandmother's family was very, very rigid.
Hmm.
Now I know this is gonna sound horrible, but they come from German stock.
I can totally
No, but they
I
were
can
immigrants.
totally believe that.
I know. But life was very serious. There was playing and joyfulness. You know, it was essentially frowned upon.
Hmm.
And you hear about these sectors and in the communities and the Protestant work ethic, and they were very um,
Calvinistic, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's a thing.
Yeah, I
Joy,
mean, and
but
then you have the Irish or you have Hungarian people, for
mhm.
example. Those are
Yeah,
quite the, or
yeah,
Bavarian. Those are, I think,
yeah.
even if it maybe it is really yeah, grounded a bit in the religion, because also
Mm-hmm.
between
Mm-hmm.
Protestants and Catholic people, and the
Mm-hmm.
Catholics can go and say uh, in this confession chair every week and say,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
this,
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
okay, now do 10 Ave Marias, and then you're good to go again. And the
Mm-hmm.
Protestants
Mm-hmm.
don't have that, and they
Mm-hmm.
carry around all, yeah, all that they did wrong, and maybe the Catholic people are more joyful because they have an inbuilt valve to let go of things that is a burden or that lays really heavy on them, and the Protestant people don't. And so maybe a lot of
Hmm.
Protestant people are getting more in the joy squasher camp.
You're making my mind run into like multiple rabbit holes right now. Because I'm thinking, really, really, are Catholic people joyful? No. There's the shame factor that comes with Catholicism is so strong, and the punishment factor in Catholicism is enormous.
Hmm.
Um, Even though they go to confession, the yeah the yeah well that's a big subject right there, but
For me, it
probably
was the
shouldn't go down that rabbit
connection.
hole. But I could say this. Okay, I would be a horrible priest, Catholic priest, because I would sit in the confessional booth and just giggle, like, because I would be like, "You did what?" Like,
Really?
it's
Show
the
me.
first thing that popped into my. Oh, you think that's bad? You should have heard the guy in here before. Yeah, that would be no. I would be that would be bad. That would be bad. In a way, though, it would be fun.
A little
Yeah,
bit.
hearing everybody's secrets, and then it's storytelling, right? But I mean, what's not to like? I mean, I'm guessing they don't tell you really. They're really bad stuff that they do. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a little bit one size fits all thinking to say, okay, Catholics are this way and Protestants are that
Really?
way.
Yeah. Thank.
But
Mm,
I can't
so
help
funny.
to not to look for patterns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that
But
was
it's like
just
trying
a
to
pattern that
understand.
popped up in my head when you described it.
Hmm. Anyway, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not. You started it, but I'm just going to avoid it. I'm just going to walk away from those rabbit holes.
How do
Yeah,
you in your
yeah.
workshops? Is it a thing more from an intuitive thing to induce joy and humor in a workshop, or do you plan it out and think, haha, yeah, at this point of the workshop,
Never,
I have a really good
never.
good joke, or I have a really good gag that I can build in.
Oh, never. I never do
Never.
jokes or gags. Never, never,
Okay.
never, never. It's because that's contrived. And it's like the most powerful ones are the ones that emerge. Emergent
That's true.
humor
Yeah.
is the most powerful. Now, of course, I'm not doing stand up in my workshops, so if I was doing stand up, then it would be studied and worked on and repeated. I don't even know if I'd be capable of that because of course that consists of writing material and then memorizing it and then delivering it. It would be very hard for me to do. It would have to be, I think. I mean, I've never tried, but I imagine that would be very, very difficult to do because I read a lot and listen to comedians and study the comedic, um, comedic writing, comedic strategy of what they're doing when they're writing and creating, and I admire their capacity to write it and learn it and repeat it.
Mm.
Um, it would be, I imagine that would be very difficult for me to do. Not impossible, but just very difficult,
For
I
for
think.
me, it induces or that's one reason why I always use notes, because when I prepare for a workshop or keynote or so, and I have the idea of a fun part or of a joke that I can build in there, or of a slide that is funny in itself and that I
Mm-hmm.
can even make funnier with a joke, then I always have to write it down, because my fear of
Okay.
forgetting it and then
Mm-hmm.
not being able to crack that joke is
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that really causes anxiety for me. So that's something I
Okay.
always prepare, so that I don't forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the best jokes are those where I'm thinking that emerge
Mm-hmm.
in the talk, or that emerge maybe in the question section after it. And the best ones are those where I say it out loud, immediately you think, oh fuck, you haven't said it, and then people start laughing, and I was like, phew, okay,
Mm-hmm.
saved by the bell.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I've got an example, and I realize in talking about this, I love where our subject has gone about humor and things, and um, but it's like I think that I have kind of this rolling thing of like the thing that makes me laugh du jour, the
Mm?
things that that I think are funny, and then I'll almost like try and work it into a conversation, like all the conversations that I'm having that week,
Mm-hmm.
and just because I think it's funny and I want to repeat it, and
Mm-hmm.
so then it's like, so for example, so here's the example. Um, we are, and a lot of it times it's a play on words or in a situation, and if the situation changes a little bit, then I add more words to it,
Mm-hmm.
and so the, I have a saying because we have this kitten, and she's like 4 months old, 5 months old now, and she's just into everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I'm trying to do these, like, the NFTs and whatever, badges or tokens, and so I'm working on this stuff in a lot of different ways, and so the one thing that popped into my head was, um, kind of like if you did employee of the month and you gave them a badge or a token, or
Mm-hmm.
not a token, but a badge for that or something. And so this image pops into my head for the cat, and it's like, oh, she's just so annoying today. And it's like, okay, she's the president of the itty bitty shitty kitty committee, and
Yeah.
right? So this is like about 3 weeks ago, I guess, something like, maybe it might have been last month or whatever. And it's like, and she's just like in everything. And so I have a squirt bottle, and you have to like squirt her from across the room, because if I'm doing something like this, here it's cool because I have the door shut, so she can't bother me. But it's like the only door that we basically shut in the household. And so when I'm in the big room, there's just, yeah. So the squirt bottle I have to get, because she digs in the plants. She's a little asshole, because she's trying, and it's hard to train a cat, right? So the title really fits. And so last week she comes into heat. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with cats or whatever, it's like when they come into their, so she's becoming a woman, right? And, and so, and it's pretty pathetic. And she wants the attention of a man. And she calls out, and she's like, wah, wah. And I have to, if I'm online or something, or I'm in a group, I have to mute a lot because it's very loud. But I find it really funny because she's super needy. And so I switched her title. So her title right now is, she's the president of the Little Bitty Horny Kitty Committee. And so so I'm thinking, okay, what's it going to be in next week? What's it going to be? So her title of, yeah, voila. So that's kind of what's funny right now, is because she's just in our space and very, very needy. And our other cat, a male cat, and he's been castrated, and he doesn't know what to do. And he's like, well, and so he grabs her by the neck, and he's humping strange parts of her body. He's nowhere near the territory that, she wants him to be in. And it's funny. It's funny as hell. Yeah, so there's this, we have like episodes of, the Wild Kingdom, domestic version of the Wild Kingdom in our house right now. And it's funny. It's funny as hell. And so we have like, we pretend to do like running commentary, and yeah, because she's in a very desperate state, is a light way of putting it. And it's funny. It's funny. Not, if you were laughing at humans in that way, it would be very wrong. But because it's a cat, it's funny. So I write messages to my friends. Well, you got one. And like, yeah, it's, but I know people will laugh. Right when I told you about it, you say, yeah, you laughed, and that's super satisfying.
Yeah.
But I don't plan on it. It's just that, I know this is funny. I should share it. And it's not a joke. Life is funny. It's just everything's funny. And I know it's tragic for her. It's difficult for her. It's funny for us. And I'm not heartless. Well, most of the time. But
yeah, but if she could understand us, then maybe she would find it funny as well. In some way.
Yeah. But I mean, you gotta laugh. I mean, life is, because I know that, like, what she's going through, and the disruption, because it is disruptive, and she's way too young, way, way, way too young. And so, and our deal with getting her was to then let her have a litter of kittens, but she needs to be at least a year old. And so it's like, oh my God, how many times are we gonna have to go through this? And this first one, because she's so young, it's pretty mild. And this is the first time Saskia has experienced a cat going through this. And I was like, is this your first time? She's like, yes. I was like, it's funny, isn't it? And she's like, yes. Because you stand her, she's writhing on the floor. Not the cat, not Saskia. And see, I knew that would make you laugh. And and so we're standing there, we're looking at the cat. We're like, What's the matter, kitty? Yeah.
I just remembered that in German it's called rollig. It's not the heat. It's called the cat is rollig because they are rolling on the floor a lot.
Ah, oh, that's so funny. But yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, that's what they
That's
do.
what they
So
do.
it's
Yeah,
called
yeah.
rollig
So she's
in
rolling
German.
around like in just agony of need, and you know, it's funny. It's funny, and but yeah, and so this is like the humor, the humor of the moment, and so of course I'm going to share it. Yeah, and any of my friends who have cats, they most of them, if they've experienced it before, or if they've only had neutered cats, they don't. But because you're talking about your cat, then they're interested.
Yeah.
And dog people are like, thank God I don't have that, you know.
When you are when you are a teacher, when you are teaching people, then maybe it's good to have a mixture of emerging humor. That's where you pull from your recent experiences or from everyday life or the
Mm-hmm.
news, and some studied humor that has to do with the material you are studying. So the emerging humor maybe is more for the ambience, for the baseline of joy,
Mm-hmm.
and the studied humor is more like a tool to set the anchors for the learning process.
Could be. Could
Because
be.
most of the teachers I know, I mean, I didn't had to do 1 year twice in school, so I didn't learn the same stuff from the same teacher twice. So I don't know, but I could imagine that they use every year when they get new students, they use the same jokes with the content they have to teach again and again and again, because at some point,
Mm.
like a comedian, okay, those jokes just work every time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you are
I've got
using them
certain
again and again.
things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've got certain things that I do. And so if the window comes up, I'm like, ah, that'll fit in there. And I know it's amusing, and but at the same time it's a teaching moment. It's like the ones that I use, there's one that I use that and it's, my dad, and I love him because he's my dad, but he was just like, holy cow, what a character. He was like a character from a movie, and very racist, very misogynistic, you know, and if he was not my dad, I would just like want to have nothing to do with him.
Hmm.
But he's my dad, and so it's like, ugh, how do you, you know, embrace the two sides of that, and because I would call him out on stuff like that. But I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
stories, and some of them are just, and so when I tell them, it's like it kind of showcases the complete, it is a teaching moment because it shows how somebody can that's like that has no clue how they're
Mm-hmm.
coming across,
Mm-hmm.
you know and so I mean, it is funny that I mean, there's a funny side to it, not what he's doing, but the fact that somebody can be that clueless. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of when I tell them, that's what comes across.
Mm-hmm.
um, but they're high value stories. So when if a window shows up, it's like, ha, and I recognize it. I recognize the window where I can use one of those,
Mm-hmm.
one of the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, but they're not jokes. It all comes back to storytelling. The storytelling and
Yeah.
the bittersweet, the humor in the getting punched in the face in martial arts. There's a bittersweetness to it, that now I'm just sounding masochistic, aren't I? But you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
but it makes it light if you can tie humor to something really different, or to when you were punched in
Right.
the face, you make it easier and lighter for those who are new, or for those who are just starting to learn it.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think
Mhm. Mhm.
without
Yeah.
diminishing it.
Right. 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 And there's a framing of it where you can absorb the story and the lesson in something, um, through the kind of the bittersweet, the light and the dark, the
Yeah,
yin yang thing,
yeah.
and yeah, for sure, very powerful. Those are, in fact, those are the most powerful. I know you got to jump off in 5 minutes, and
Yes.
so we
I,
should probably wrap this up. It was funny. I didn't think we were going to go the whole time about that, the laughing,
yeah, me neither.
the laughing and learning, but I was really happy, um, kind of where it went. Interesting, very interesting stuff.
Yeah,
And
that was fun.
yeah, so I would encourage anybody who all three of you who are listening. See, there's one.
Right.
And I don't know why I keep like, I love to say it because I think it's funny. I think it's
Yeah,
funny that you and I are sitting here in a vacuum and just talking to ourselves because we enjoy each other's company so much
yeah.
that it doesn't really matter, this type of thing. And that I know that a lot of people are like so serious about their podcast, and it's like, oh, how many people do we have now? And I'm like, you and I know for a fact we don't care. But then it's, because we would do this if nobody was listening.
Yeah.
And I think that that's wonderful and funny. And so it's yeah. But if any of the three of you that are listening want to share, like, the learning and laughing lessons, please do. Please do. We love stories.
Oh yes. Send us your stories.
Yeah.
We put our
Oh
contact
yeah.
in the show notes, and then send us your stories about laughing and learning.
Hmm. 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 Do you know what would be fun to do sometime? Would be to do a question and answer. A question and
Yes.
answer from
Yes.
people. Then that would be so interesting. I don't know if people should trust us about, like, then it was like, kind of like the Dear Abby thing. I was like, oh, we would give such bad advice. It would be phenomenal. It would be awesome. We would give such bad advice. Yeah. So I was like, people,
It doesn't need it doesn't
if
need
you
only to
dare,
be asking for advice. It's like the ask me anything on Reddit.
right?
So,
That's true, but it ends up kind of being advice,
yeah, most of
because
the
you give your
time.
viewpoint,
Yeah.
which is a kind of, side street advice thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be fun. That would be funny.
That would be really funny. Cool, cool.
I imagine the brave and foolish person that would do that. I don't know.
Yes.
Brave slash foolish. Yeah.
I'm listening to
Go for it.
I'm right now I'm listening to an audiobook called Shadow of the Gods, which is
Oh, that sounds familiar.
a grim dark fantasy that is playing in a Norse Viking like setting. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really cruel and really violent and really hard life there in this cold, yeah, in this cold landscape. Um, and on the cover of the book, you see it's no spoiler. I mean, there wasn't a dragon yet in the story, but on the cover of the book, you see like a dragon whose head is taking up the whole cover, and then some human, which is like tiny, 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 standing in front. It's the largest dragon I've ever seen yet in any fantasy setting. But they still get some really cool humor in it. The author, he manages to get
Well, now you're just giving me Monty Python vibes.
nah, it's
No?
cooler. It's not that silly. It's
Yeah.
cool. It's cool
Okay.
reactions, and I mean the women in the story are portrayed in a really really cool way because the sometimes the women are even much stronger warriors than their husbands, and so it's a really cool world he designed there. Yeah, but it's still grim dark, like Joe Abercrombie, for example, or Game of Thrones. But some of the jokes I think are working that well because everything else around it is such the hard dark life, and that makes the jokes even funnier when they sneak into there.
I hear your alarm. I know you
Yes.
gotta jump.
Yeah.
Yes. So cool. Done. All right.
Alrighty. I would say we find the downhill parking over the week until our next recording.
Sounds cool.
And then
Sounds cool.
I'm pretty interested with what we come
Yeah.
up for next week. And if you can't get enough of us,
I do want to touch on the neurodiversity in the neurodivergence in the military. I think that's a really interesting subject. So I'd like to really make a try, unless something super interesting like nudges that one out of the way. Totally possible.
Yeah.
But that one is the one I'd really like to
yeah, that would
have
be cool.
my vote on that one.
And that's one I really prepared a little bit on already 2 weeks ago. So yeah, that would be cool. Alrighty. Then.
All right then. Thanks for joining us, and we see you next week.
Yes, all 4 of you.
Yeah. Oh, we gained one. We gained one during the last hour.
Maybe. I'm optimistic.
Maybe.
Okay.
Cool. All right. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.